guy one night, though, he did come up and he says, my brother's an idiot. He says, I take offense to that. And I talked with him for a while. I could tell he was an only child. Back in New York, where I was raised, we had a couple guys that lived together, and both of them were a little slow, but they were nice guys. Well, this one guy worked for about a month on his front yard, getting it all landscaped and enclosed, and he was so proud of it. And the next morning he woke up, and his neighbor knocked on the door, and he said, somebody stole the gate off your front lawn there. And he said, yeah, I know. He said, well, did you see him? He said, yeah. He said, why didn't you say something to him? He said, well, I was afraid he'd take offense. Well, the next day they were met on the street, the two of them, and one said, what do you got in the box? He said, well, it's a cordless drill I got for my foot on a new gate. And he said, where'd you get it? He said, over at Lowe's. How much did it cost you? He said, it didn't cost me nothing. He said, well, what are you talking about? They don't give those away. He said, well, he said, it was a $50 drill marked down to $25. He said, I just bought it with the $25 I saved. Well, they talked for a while, and finally one says, what direction was I coming from when we met? He said, back over there. He said, oh, good, I've already had lunch. He says, how much you weigh anyway? He said, 250 pounds. He says, boy, you sure picked up a few pounds. He says, I hope to tell you, I weighed 6 pounds, 4 ounces when I was born. Well, enough of that foolishness. We're going to open our program tonight with Glenn Steiger, and this old guy, he fell down. He tripped on a speed bump out here, I think. And we picked him up and took him over to the emergency room, and the doctor said, well, he said, where does it hurt? He said, well, he says it hurts, gosh, when I touch my knee. I said, it hurts when I touch my hip and my chest. He said, it really hurts when I touch my head. The doctor said, well, it's no wonder, you got a broken finger. Well, the chorus is going to do two numbers for us, colorful numbers, Yellow Bird and 5'2". I have a request for a joke I've told before. And this guy don't want his name mentioned, but he requests this about every year. Anyway, these two guys I was telling you about back in New York, they got together and decided they were going to go down to Disney World. And when they got into New Jersey, they saw a sign that said, clean restrooms ahead. By the time they got to Florida, they had cleaned about 250 restrooms. On the way down there, they stopped off at Atlantic City. They'd seen a sign, boardwalk. So they went out and watched it for a while. It didn't move anywhere, so they decided to go out on the ocean. And they're standing there on the beach, and this seagull come over, and they did what seagulls always do, and hit this guy right on the head. And his partner says, well, I'll go get some toilet paper. You just wait here. And he said, oh, don't bother. He said, by the time you get back, it'll be 5 miles down the coast. Well, I'm on a roll, and my luck keep going. When they got down to Disney World, I don't know if you've been down there, there's a little restaurant in the Disney World called Kentucky. It has big mirrors all along the wall. Well, they went in and sat down for lunch, and they're eating, and this one said to the other, said, well, there's a guy over there looks just like you, don't look. And he looked, he said, oh, I looked too quick, he's looking right at me. And he said, did you ever notice the other guy looked a lot like you? And he said, well, let's go say hi to him. And the guy said, never mind, they're coming over. Well, they had a national convention of religious leaders, and during the break, these three were talking, and the Catholic priest said, you know, it's getting expensive. The economy's really going bad. He said, it cost me $5,000 to call heaven from Italy. And the rabbi said, well, it only cost $4,000 from New York. And the Mormon bishop said, it don't cost me anything. He said, how come? He said, well, from Salt Lake, it's a local call. Okay, now our last number before the intermission is, I knew there'd be a Super Bowl joke in there somewhere.
Hey, Bob.
Yes.
Can I tell you a little story about my wife and I were having words the other day, and she was complaining. She says, you're always talking about death. Death, death, death. You're always talking about death. And I said, what do you mean? I never say anything about death. She says, oh yeah? Every time you come into a room, you say, what am I here after?
Yeah, but you know, my wife and I had words the other day too, and I never got a chance to say mine. Hey, Bob.
Yes.
It was so cold last week, I seen a bunch of lawyers walking around with their hands in their own pockets.
That is cool.
Hey, Bob. You know, the other day Cliff went to the doctor, and he says, Doc, you know, I got problems with the ear. I can't hear a thing out of it. And the doctor, he looked in his ear and says, well, Cliff, you got a suppository in your ear. And he said, well, Doc, thank you. I now know where my hearing aid went.
You guys remember Will Rogers? He was one of my favorites, and he used to play havoc with a politician. One time he said, supposing you were an idiot, and supposing you were a U.S. congressman, but I repeat myself. Okay, speaking of famous people, next is his husband arrived home one night and found his wife was in kind of a grouchy mood, and he says, what's the matter? And she said, well, I was pressing your suit for tonight, and I burned a big hole in your pants. And he said, well, don't worry about it. He said, there's 2 pair of pants with that suit. She said, well, it's a good thing, too. I used them to patch the hole I burned. Now, you know, Grandma MacArthur told about cell phones, and that's my pet peeve as well. I tell you, the other day I went to McDonald's to get something to eat, and I was heading back home, and this kid, I could see him coming at me, and he's jitzing around, you know, you could tell he was listening to that old radio, and he got the cell phone, and he's yakking away. And boy, he turned left right in front of me. I had hit the brakes. I tell you, I got my hamburgers, spilled my Coke, and lost my place in the newspaper. I got to do something about those cell phones. Okay, you know, they were having a dance up at the senior center here a few weeks ago, and these girls were talking, and the theme of the dance was supposed to be try to dress in something that would match your color of your husband's hair. So this one lady, she said, I'm going to wear a red dress, and the other one said, well, I'm going to wear a brown dress with just a little gray trim around the bottom of it. And said, Eleanor, what are you going to wear? She says, I'm not going to the dance. That's trouble with intelligent crowds. They want to get ahead of you. Anyway, you figured it out. Well, we're about to the end of our show. I got one more little one that I like really well. This kid was rushed into the emergency room, and the nurse was following him along and said, young man, we've got to have your name. We've got to notify your parents. He finally woke up and he says, they already know my name. Well, we've had a great time here tonight. I hope you guys...